Let's engage in a deep dive into the national parks established in the geographic defining state of Washington. I will take you inside 13 parks, share a glimpse into the park's history, and enchant you with defining reasons to place Washington State's national parks on your bucket list. From bird's eye views of alpine peaks to moss-laden rainforest, Pacific coast sea stacks to active volcanoes, islands, archipelagos to spits, Washington State is an outdoor enthusiast dream, a hiker's paradise, and a historian's wonderland. I will be including informative seasonal and transportation choices to reach these specific parks to make the most of your visit to any one or all of these magnificent stops in the Pacific Northwest. For example, taking ferry rides across the Puget Sound can definitely help mitigate the gridlock traffic that defines the Seattle freeways. Sit back, watch, and learn why these national park units, from downtown Seattle to the Pacific Coast and from historic forts to a historic missionary massacre site, can be included in your next family vacation or weekend getaway. There is so much presented for armchair travelers and homeschool families. Everyone will want to cling to information presented about these 13 worthwhile stops. There are a few great things you can do to make your trips more fun, more memorable, and they're not all that expensive. I'll tell you about those 2 tips a little bit later. Travel across America with me. Welcome to Washington State, the evergreen state. From Mount Olympus to Grand Coulee, this is the 42nd state, 20th in land area, and 13th in population. Let's go to the national park units in Washington. We have been to all of the national park units in the state of Washington, plus heritage areas and scenic trails. You'll want to familiarize yourself with the Washington State ferries to get to all types of fun places around the Puget Sound. And now for the park sites in Washington State. We'll be going to 3 national parks: Olympic National Park, North Cascades National Park, Mount Rainier National Park. There's Eby's Landing National Historical Reserve. Wait till you hear what's so special about that. There are 2 historical sites: the Whitman Mission National Historic Site, the Fort Vancouver National Historic Site. And yes, we'll be talking about all of these. There are 3 national recreation areas. The Lake Chelan and Ross Lake National Recreation Areas are part of the North Cascades National Park. The Lake Roosevelt National Recreation Area, which includes the Grand Coulee Dam. There are 2 historical parks: the San Juan Island National Historical Park and the Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park in downtown Seattle. And yes, the main unit is in Skagway. And I will show you a glimpse of the Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park in Skagway, Alaska. And I have included 2 bonus parks that are not a part of the Department of Interior, because not all national monuments and sites are part of the Department of Interior. Some are part of the Forest Service and agricultural units of the federal government, or the Bureau of Land Management manages some national monuments. We will be going to Mount St. Helens, this historic place, this gorgeous place. It is a national volcanic monument. The state features 20 national wildlife refuges. We will be taking you to the Dungeness National Wildlife Refuge. It's not far from Olympic National Park. Wait till you learn how ginormous Olympic National Park is. Many of these national park units are within a relatively short driving distance from Seattle, or at least the Puget Sound, which is easily crossed by the Washington State ferry system. Our first stop, Olympic National Park. There are 9 ranger stations and visitor centers. Try to go to all of them. We have, in 1897, Vermont-born President Grover Cleveland designated most of the biologically diverse Olympic Peninsula as the Olympic Forest Reserve. Due to overhunting, New York-based President Theodore Roosevelt redesignated part of the preserve Mount Olympus National Monument in 1909. Conservationists did not rest until 1938 when President Franklin Roosevelt secured national park status for the majestic area, teeming with brilliant colored plant life and abundant wildlife. An amazing 95% of the park is specifically designated as wilderness, with over 600 miles of established trails. The park protects the largest old-growth forest in the Pacific Northwest. A wide range from 40 to 240 inches of rain falls in differing parts of the park, which extends from sea level to 7,980 feet, the peak of glacier-clad Mount Olympus. We had the rare opportunity to fly in a private airplane over rugged, snow-capped Mount Olympus. Olympic National Park is Olympic in size, taking in a vast majority of northwestern Washington, requiring a minimum of 3 days to experience it adequately. Due to the travel distances between major points of interest, it is wise for visitors to plan precisely what to do before arriving to make their visit the best it can be. No park roads cross the interior of the park. Rather, short park roads pierce from the perimeter. The largest visitor center is Hurricane Ridge Visitor Center, and it is up a winding 17-mile paved road at just under 1 mile in elevation and is situated south of Port Angeles. The park has a prized 73 miles of coastline packed with sandy beaches, rocky cliffs pounded by crashing waves, oceanside tide pools teeming with colorful sea life, and picturesque sea stacks. You won't want to miss the stops at Klondike and Ruby Beach. Most years, Hoh Rainforest is dominated by giant conifers and receives upward of 12 feet of precipitation and is one of the best examples of temperate rainforest in the entire world. See ferns, mosses, and different types of maples, some with 12-inch leaves, deep in this rainforest. This rainforest is fed by the 50-mile-long wild Hoh River that originates from a glacier atop Mount Olympus. On the southwest side, visit Lake Quinault and Quinault Rainforest. There's so much to see in the Quinault Valley. 16 trailheads and 6 champion conifer trees. There is also Staircase. It's located on the southeastern side of the park. You will pass gorgeous Lake Cushman to get to the Staircase Rapids Loop Trail that follows along the North Fork of the Skokomish River. This park has superb, informative handouts, and due to the park's vast size, call ahead to get all the handouts they are willing to send. Our next stop, the North Cascades National Park. You can enter it from the Seattle side or from the Lake Chelan National Recreation Area. We have done both. Please subscribe. And if you have, thank you. And if you haven't, could you please subscribe? The North Cascades National Park is known as the American Alps. Ross Lake National Recreation Area divides the north and south units of the national park. The two park units, the Ross Lake National Recreation Area and Lake Chelan National Recreation Area, form the 10 million-acre North Cascades National Park Service Complex. You will also be entering the Okanagan National Forest, the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest, and Wenatchee National Forest when visiting this complex, and you'll find that 93% of the park has been designated to the Stephen Mather Wilderness, which gives it additional protection. The park contains 300 glaciers, the most of any national park, amounting to more than 1/3 of the glaciers in the lower 48. Lace up your hiking boots and strap on a backpack because there are over 300 miles of surmountable mountain trails, including a big part of the Pacific Crest National Scenic Trail. The traditional route will take you along State Route 20 through the Ross Lake National Recreation Area. Ross Lake is 2 miles wide and 24 miles long, and the construction of this roadway was quite a feat. No roadways penetrated the park until the 1970s. This is an important note. The highway is closed November to April. Non-winter recreational activities have a narrow window. You can take the Rainy Lake National Recreation Trail that leads to a fabulous overlook of Rainy Lake, views of Lyell Glacier, and a waterfall cascading into the lake. You will probably U-turn at the Washington Pass viewpoint, the highest point on the highway. This pass is 93 miles east of I-5, and the last gas station is 57 miles west of the pass in Marble Mount at mile marker 105. You will need to ride a passenger ferry or board a private boat or airplane to reach the primitive wilderness outpost of Stehekin Valley to access the stunning scenery of Lake Chelan National Recreation Area. From the town of Chelan to Stehekin, ride 50 miles by boat up the deep blue glacier-created Lake Chelan, named after the Chelan Indians who carved pictographs on the lake's cliffs. At 1,500 feet deep, it is the country's third deepest lake. The water is often emerald green when the fine glacial flour flows into it from the glacial streams. Extreme outdoor enthusiasts can reach the area by foot trails. I wouldn't recommend it. High points of Lake Chelan National Recreation Area is Stehekin Landing, High Bridge, the 312-foot Rainbow Falls, We're blessed with seeing a rainbow at Rainbow Falls. How wonderful! The 1911 Buckner Homestead Orchard. And the Agnes Gorge Trail. Based on too much experience, we also recommend the Stehekin Pastry Company, where the sweet aroma of oversized muffins, pecan sticky buns, and flavored coffees impress all who enter. And if you're intrigued by Stehekin, I want to encourage you to watch my other videos on the Stehekin Valley. Remember when I mentioned that I had 2 tips for you? Well, this is number 1. I totally recommend that you buy a national park pass, simply because the day-use park pass fees are really climbing up. And after you visit 3 or 4 parks, you've paid for your pass. And if you're a senior, it's a one-time fee and it's good for life. The next national park is Mount Rainier National Park. This might be one of the most famous mountains or volcanoes in all of America. Established in 1899, Mount Rainier National Park is the nation's 5th national park and the highest volcano in the Cascade Range. Steam vents in the summit's crater suggest the volcano is not extinct, have been occurring between 100 and 150 years ago. Dangerous mudslides of volcanic material are common. At 14,410 feet, Mount Rainier is the 5th highest peak in the lower 48. In May 1792, Britain's Royal Navy commander, Captain George Vancouver, the first European to sight the peak, named it after Rear Admiral Peter Rainier. 26 glaciers drape the perpetually snow-covered summit, and 3 peaks top the bulbous summit: Liberty Cap, Point Success, and Columbia Crest, the highest. The named glaciers are Emmons, Paradise, and Nisqually, and Emmons is the largest single glacier in the lower 48. The vast park is loaded with rugged terrain, alpine lakes, and lush meadows. It is accessed via the northwest, the northeast, the southwest, and the southeastern entrances. The drive between Nisqually, the only entrance is open year-round, by the way, and the Stevens Canyon entrances are prototypical. You'll want to capture a mirror image of Mount Rainier in one of the lakes. At the Paradise section of the park, they get an average of 680 inches of snowfall annually. A park highlight is the Grove of the Patriarchs Nature Trail that weaves through an old-growth forest with dense conifers comprised of enormous firs, red cedars, and hemlocks. The spectacular trees often have gnarly or moss-laden trunks, and old-growth forests make up 60% of the park. The Sunrise Visitor Center, situated at 6,400 feet in elevation, is the highest point in the park accessible by road. One of our favorite parts of the park is the Carbon River entrance. It's at the northwest quadrant, it's quiet, and has some beautiful hikes, including the Carbon Rainforest Loop Trail, where you will hear water squishing under your hiking boots in the water-laden soil. Several days are required to experience the entire park if all roads are open. The 240 miles of trails provide an exhilarating experience, like the 93-mile Wonderland Trail that encircles the mountain. Plan a day to drive, bike, hike, stroll, and explore Eby's Landing National Historical Reserve on the 50-mile-long Whidbey Island. Whidbey Island is the second longest island in the country, and this park is managed by a trust board. This is the country's first National Historical Reserve and comprises 17,572 acres, of which 80% is privately owned. We crossed the Puget Sound aboard the Kennewick Ferry from Port Townsend, disembarking near Fort Casey State Park and Keystone Spit. The scenery is truly phenomenal, and the island is a great place to relax. Views from the dramatic bluffs of the Sound and the Strait of Juan de Fuca to the quaint streets of the well-preserved seaport town of Coupeville make up only a part of the wonders offered on this reserve. Prairies, cropland, historic farms, and forests offer luring, puzzle-style scenes to explore and photograph, and there are historical aspects that abound and include 19th century farms. And I want to make this note, visitors, please be respectful because most of this park is private property. If you want to buy us a coffee or some fuel for our journeys, our Cash App is #SPGDMG. It's also in the description below. And have you subscribed yet? If not, please subscribe. I'm standing here at the Great Grave at Whitman Mission National Historic Site. Narcissa Whitman and Eliza Spaulding, Reverend Henry Spaulding's wife, were the first white women to cross the American continent overland, and their wagons, reduced to handcarts, were the first vehicles to travel as far west as Fort Boise. Dr. Marcus and Narcissa Prentice Whitman established a mission at Wallapoo in 1836, with the primary goal to serve as Christian missionaries to convert the natives. After 1844, the main route of the Oregon Trail no longer went there. However, the sick, weary, and orphaned trail riders diverted northward to reach the Whitman mission. Over the course of 11 years, the couple served many people and interacted with fur traders and explorers. Sadly, on November 29, 1847, Cayuse Indians burned the Whitman's mission in retaliation for their children's death from measles, because Dr. Whitman's medicine given to mission children allowed them to live. The Whitman massacre affected the lives of many regional Americans and Indian residents. And when the missionary work abruptly ended, Joseph Meek traveled to Washington, D.C. in 1848 to petition for territorial status. His sincere plea was acted on, and the Oregon Territory became the first territory west of the Rocky Mountains. None of the mission structures remain at the Whitman Mission National Historic Site. You will see the foundations of the adobe-constructed main house, immigrant house, and blacksmith shop, and second house, which are marked. The great grave where the Whitmans and 11 others are buried in a mass grave moved me deeply. And on the massacre's 50th anniversary in 1897, a monument was erected on the hilltop and a marble slab was placed over the great grave. The tomahawk that was more than likely used by the Cayuse chief Tomahawks to kill Dr. Whitman is at the Oregon Historical Society Museum in Portland. There is a tomahawk in the Park Museum, but more than likely not the actual weapon. And if you're there during the fall, you can grab an apple from one of the apple trees. Now let's travel to the border of Oregon on the Columbia River to the Fort Vancouver National Historic Site. On the northern bank of the Columbia River in Vancouver, Fort Vancouver National Historic Site is the focal point of the Vancouver National Historic Reserve. 20 of the Hudson's Bay Company posts throughout the Pacific Northwest ship furs to the giant headquarters in Vancouver for overseas shipment, making this fort the key fur trading post in North America between 1825 and 1860. This strategic location was a British maneuver to secure the area as an outpost for the British Crown. However, it was not enough to offset the tremendous influx of Americans into the ever-growing Oregon Territory, which we just learned about. By 1866, all of the original structures had burned or had fallen into disrepair. In 1941, it became one of the first national historic sites in the West and one of the largest multicultural villages in the Pacific Northwest. Since 1947, archaeologists excavating the original fort site have unearthed over 2 million artifacts. The historic site includes a reconstructed British fur trading fort, a historic U.S. Army parade ground, and one of the oldest continuously operating airfields, and the old McLaughlin House. The blooming flowers, gorgeous shrubs, and roses, sprouting garden vegetable plants enhanced our impression of this well-maintained park, palisade, and fort. An interesting thing that we learned on our tour was that the wooden fort's cannons mounted in the bastion were fired only to salute visiting ships and dignitaries. Highlights along the 100-mile Coulee Corridor Byway include the Grand Coulee Dam and Franklin D. Roosevelt Lake. Federally designated in 1946, Lake Roosevelt National Recreation Area includes scenic drives, lake activities, and the imposing Grand Coulee Dam. The Grand Coulee is 4 miles wide and bordered on 3 sides by steep basalt cliffs. And if you didn't know, a coulee is a steep, walled gorge. Flanked by a dramatic landscape, the Columbia River flows 400 miles through Washington, forms the state border with Oregon, and then turns west to the Pacific Ocean. The Columbia River is one of the most gorgeous rivers in all of America. After decades of discussion, the dam project's groundbreaking ceremonies occurred on July 16, 1933, harnessing the Columbia River. The gravity dam produces hydroelectric power and provides irrigation for over 670,000 acres of cropland. This is the nation's largest producer of hydroelectric power and the world's 3rd largest hydroelectric facility. We camped at Plum Point. It is one of 26 park campgrounds, and we attended the evening light show projected on the dam. On a clear day, we flew in a private plane over the Strait of Juan de Fuca and landed at Friday Harbor Airport. Borrowing a courtesy car, we drove to the resort village of Friday Harbor here on Old San Juan Island to see the San Juan Island National Historical Park. The park incorporates the English camp on the north end and the American Camp and Visitor Center on the south end. And on June 15, 1859, an American farmer shot a pig owned by the Hudson's Bay Company that was rooting up his garden. A confrontation named the Pig War erupted. What should have been an understandable dispute between neighbors escalated to armed soldiers and military vessels. This ultimately led to 12 years of joint military occupation and upheaval for the islanders. The pig was the only casualty, and the boundary dispute was finally settled in 1872. Sounds silly, doesn't it? But you just gotta believe it. The only way to get there is by ferry or an airplane ride. The San Juan Island is nestled between Washington's mainland and Vancouver Island, British Columbia. The San Juan archipelago consists of 172 named islands and is considered the country's most beautiful archipelago. The state ferry system serves the 4 largest islands: Orcas, Lopez, Shaw, and this San Juan, so you can reach the historical park. And this is our second tip. I highly recommend that you get a National Park Passport book. We have 11 of them. Not that they're all full, because each book has sections for each region of the country. The main reason why we have to have so many books is because some of the regions, like out west, get full really fast. Every year, the National Park Service puts out a full sheet with a stamp from a park that represents each part of the country. For parks that do not have one of these stamps, usually in the gift shop, you can find a sticker that will work. All of the national parks do have a date stamp, and many have multiple stamps with exciting things that represent their park. We treasure our passport books, and you will do the same. Now, downtown Seattle and the Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park. It's located at Pioneer Square in downtown Seattle. It is so much fun. I highly recommend you going there. Have you subscribed yet? Please subscribe. We have also been fortunate to visit Skagway, Alaska, and go to the Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park there. And as I've mentioned, the Klondike Gold Rush National Historical Park is comprised of 2 units, the Skagway unit and the Seattle unit. Both units display amazingly decorated time period general stores overflowing with supplies such as candles, tools, evaporated apples, and soap. Yes, they needed soap. The informative placards explain Seattle's role as the staging area for the Northwest-bound adventurers, along with authentic route maps. The multi-level displays are compelling, interactive, and fun, and not to be missed. It's all about heading to the Klondike and the goldfields. And now, one of our 2 bonus features, Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument. Many of you were alive when Mount St. Helens blew. Within the Cascade Volcanic Arc, which is part of the Pacific Ring and surrounded by the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest, Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument was designated in 1982 to inform visitors, maintain historicity, and increase scientific study of a recently erupted volcano and protect an active volcano. What remains of Mount St. Helens rises magnificently out of the Cascade Range. Captain George Vancouver named the mountain after British diplomat Lord St. Helens when he first saw the mountain on May 19, 1792. And this is one of the things I really like because I'm a huge Lewis and Clark fan. Lewis and Clark sighted the mountain in their diaries as they traveled along the Columbia River in 1805 and again in 1806. Active from 1831 to 1857, the volcano lay dormant from 1857 to 1980, but it is still considered the most active volcano in the Cascades. In March 1980, a 4.2 earthquake set stage for the main event when a 5.1 earthquake set off a massive debris avalanche, the largest in recorded history. It has been over 4 decades since months of renewed activity culminated in the May 18, 1980, 8:32 a.m. Sunday eruption. You can travel down Spirit Lake Memorial Highway and learn all about the event, and you will eventually reach 2 visitor centers. But don't expect to reach Spirit Lake. Spirit Lake is reached only from the northeast side of the park. The Coldwater Ridge affords the best vantage point of the volcano. At the Windy Ridge Viewpoint, at 4,170 feet elevation, you can overlook Spirit Lake. And then near Cougar, the closest community to the lava dome, find the Pine Creek Information Center on the south side of the volcano. And this is where we accessed the Ape Cave lava tube. We visited there on May 18th and toured this lava tube, which is North America's longest continuous lava tube. Sloshing through the snow-covered trail to reach the basalt cave's entrance, our tennis shoes became soaked, and we thought that walking in this lava tube was similar to being inside an unlit subway tunnel without the train or the tracks. Be sure to take a flashlight and wear sturdy shoes. And our final park and our final bonus, the Dungeness National Wildlife Refuge. This is a stunning spit. On the shore of Dungeness Bay with Canada's Vancouver Island in the background, visit the Dungeness National Wildlife Refuge. It's north of Sequim, pronounced Squim, but spelled Sequim. Along the Pacific Flyway, wildlife includes waterfowl and shorebirds, along with shellfish, fish, marine mammals, and terrestrial mammals. After you park, you'll take the half-mile relatively level ribbon-like trail through a fabulous rainforest with bright green moss decorating the native trees. And once you descend the bluff to the beach, another lengthy task lays ahead. A 5-mile walk along one of the world's longest natural sand spits to see up close or tour the new Dungeness Light Station National Historic Site. The driftwood is so enormous that only Sasquatch could move a piece. This is Washington. Growing 13 feet each year, the spit creates a tranquil bay in the waters of the Strait of San Juan de Fuca. I have been to 242 national park sites, and I love sharing this information with you. And besides national park sites, we've been to many scenic rivers, historic trails, and heritage corridors. I've traveled the nation full-time for over 30 years and have been to almost every city in the lower 48 and thousands of points in between, and I love sharing these adventures with you, whether you are an armchair traveler, planning a family vacation, or a local looking for more things to see, or a homeschool family wanting to supplement your curriculum. Don't forget to check out my channel for hundreds of videos on other great places. And I have an offer in the description below if you purchase one of my Off and On, The Beaten Path, Unclassic Road Trips, Western or Central editions. Flip-flops, hiking boots, tennis shoes, ugly shoes, on the ground in Washington State. All this information and more is in my Off and On, The Beaten Path, The Unclassic Road Trip.